To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. A time to plant, a time to reap. A time to kill, a time to heal. A time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down. A time to dance, a time to mourn. A time to cast away stones. A time to gather stones together. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time of love, a time of hate, a time of war, a time of peace. A time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time for love, a time to hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Grounding Experience at Fountain Street Church. It is so good to be with you again tonight, and so good to be joined by James Hughes of the Chapel Band. It's great to be in this space with you, and I'm excited for what we have to share as we explore this week's theme of the good news of neuroplasticity and really dealing with change, how we can change, how we have changed. But we'll begin this week, as we will begin each week, by starting with ritual, setting space, setting intention, and releasing the time before this so we can be truly present in this time. So as last week, I'll begin by lighting some candles, and if you have a candle at home that you wish to light, I invite you to do that, and really to focus on all of the sensations associated with this. The smells, the texture of the match, the way the light and the temperature changes as you do this. And as we engage in our ritual, I'm just going to invite James to play a little bit of background music for us. Lighting a candle at home, I invite you to notice perhaps the change in your breath, in your heart rate, in your mindset as you light these candles. And as we did last week, we'll also invite you to take a moment to release and to cleanse that which you need to let go of to enter into this space. So whether it's wiping your skin down or lighting sage, Palo Santo, or maybe spraying a scent in the air. For us here, we have a pitcher of water and a cloth. So I'll wash my hands and I'll invite James in a moment to come up and to do the same. Just take a moment to notice what it's like to intentionally set down the day, whatever came before this, and whatever will come after, so you can be present here. Set it there and have a seat on the stool there. And as we did last week, we will continue with creating an altar with symbols of the intention, the theme that we're going to explore this week. And I asked James to bring, I was so excited when you can take your mask off if you want.
Okay.
I was so excited when we started talking, working together, and sharing ideas about symbols of change. And I was realizing I don't want James just only to bring his musical gifts to this, which are many. I want you to bring yourself, your full self. because that's what we're asking people to do in this place. And so in that vein, I said, James, would you mind partaking in this conversation with me? And I'm so grateful that you said yes.
I'm so grateful you asked.
And so I'm going to share just briefly first, and we'll come back to this, the symbol of change that I brought. And I'll explain it to you. I can't remember what it's, something ball or orb, something orb. We'll come back to this, but this is my symbol. And it goes with some breathing work that we're going to do. My relationship to breath has really been changed in the last year, especially in some of the practices that I've used that I'm going to teach you and share with you. But James, you brought a symbol too. Do you want to say more about it and show it off before we put it on the altar?
Chapel people from last year will probably recognize this device, flip phone. And I told a story, I think before the end of chapel season last year, before the winter, before the holidays. So this must have been back in November. My life had finally come to a place where I wanted to choose to leave survival mode, that I could. And that was something hard for me to recognize at the time. And so I found myself in a place where I was also too plugged in. I was always available to everybody, texts, emails, phone calls, everything. I was always having to be on, and that was very stressful on my body, on my mind. And things were going really well with all of my other endeavors in life, and it was the first time that I felt that I could relax. And so I made the decision to buy a flip phone, to have times where I'm not available in certain ways. And it really, like, you know how if you give something up, you didn't really, or take something on, you didn't really know how much you needed it until you finally did it. That's kind of where I was. And I told this story in chapel about how my life had changed so much for the better. And then COVID happened. Yeah. So I had a glimpse of what life could be like without, being plugged in all the time, or worrying all the time, or just being on the edge all the time, financially, personally, all that sort of stuff. Spend more time with my family, spend time with people that I love, spend time taking care of myself. It was the first time I had established an actual routine in my life with, like, before going to bed, basic stuff, washing my face, getting ready for the night, reading a book. And so this now symbolizes a glimpse into what I thought my future life was going to be. Then it was much like everyone else experienced during COVID, I had to go back into survival mode. And so this kind of gives me hope for, what the future can still be if we're able to move past this.
So it symbolized a choice for change.
Right.
And then how circumstances forced another change.
Yep.
And the hope for future change.
That's right.
Can I open it so it'll sit 3D on our altar? Wow. Thank you. So, and I'm conscious as we're talking, I introduced you, but I don't think I introduced myself.
No?
I'm Reverend Matthew Cockrum, Minister for Spiritual Care and Practice here at Fountain Street Church, and I use he, him pronouns. And I'll let you introduce yourself, even though I've already done it.
Yep, my name is James Forrest Hughes, and I use he, him pronouns. And I play music here at Fountain Street.
And you're the leader of the chapel band?
Yeah. Now we call it the Unity Band.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I had not heard that. The Unity Band.
Yeah.
More change.
More change, and continuing the mission to bring people together in song.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. And I'm conscious that we're on the cusp. We just passed the autumn equinox, so that's part of the turning of the seasons, and we've talked about the turning of the church year when we had hoped that we'd all be able to gather in person, but the stress of COVID and everything is preventing that. So James and you and I talked a little bit about change and what symbolizes change and how we've experienced the changing of our minds and our lives. And you told me a story that actually informed the music we opened with,
Right.
that first piece on the electric guitar.
Or the improvisation that,
Yeah.
yeah.
What would you call that style?
That is more ambient music, music that is somewhat, possibly sometimes minimalist in nature. Other times there is a lot of layers, but music that can evoke imagery in the mind's eye, music that is generally used for background to media, film, television, plays, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Sometimes called incidental music. So
Which makes it sound, to my ear, incidental sounds like it diminishes it, but it's such that style, there's a largeness in its openness, I think.
yeah. I was really inspired by a couple of things. One was the genre of ambient music first, with an artist. His name is Christian Fennesz, goes by just Fennesz, Fennesz, where he's also a guitarist, but uses technology and a various amount of techniques to create these soundscapes by using a guitar and other things, but it doesn't sound like one. And a genre called post-rock, where bands that play rock instruments but make it sound more symphonic. Not a lot of lyrics, so instrumental music in post-rock. So yeah, just kind of sharing some things that have inspired me.
And you mentioned too that there was your initial encounter will you tell the story that you told me about your initial encounter with this body of music, how it changed your relationship to music, your sense of yourself as a musician?
Yeah. Well, I moved to Grand Rapids initially to attend music school. And there, of course, with any educational experience, you get exposed to all sorts of things. So I wanted to learn about the language of music so I can further develop my craft in writing of music and composing. And I was really envisioning being able to write large-scale pieces, very complex things, things that I previously wouldn't be able to do without some sort of formal training or understanding. And then I was exposed to classical minimalism. And that really, really changed everything for me musically. That I guess we could talk about a real brief definition, where minimalism is just kind of, you can think about it as extracting a lot out of very little. And I listened to pieces where the whole piece is one note and it's like 20 minutes long or
Wow.
something like that. And I really
Extracting a lot out of very little.
yeah.
Okay.
So I got exposed to Philip Glass and Steve Reich and Terry Riley and just a whole slew of people that had, like the minimalist school that really took seriously and explored this art form in the early part of the last century, or I guess mid part of the last century. And music and art it kind of follows the flow of what's happening socially too. So living in Grand Rapids, we know about mid-century modern furniture, that sort of thing, and that is a kind of a minimalist style in itself. So a lot of music and design and architecture and poetry and all that sort of stuff really gravitated towards, focusing in on these moments, on these details, on the simplicity of things. And that, it changed my life. It changed what I thought music, even what music is. And, I went forward from there doing more, exploring this myself and being able to expose kind of other people to things akin to that. Yeah.
I want to ask you one more question, and then I know you have a piece that exemplifies this.
Sure.
That you're going to share. And maybe you've already answered this, but if there's more you can say. How did it change your sense of yourself as a musician?
That's a good question. I was surrounded by incredibly talented people in music school, and just in general playing with groups and touring, and I'm just constantly surrounded by people that they kind of like had their things and that they were very good at them, and I didn't really know what my thing was. I was always kind of doing things that I was interested in, playing with people that I liked, playing music that I listened to, but nothing felt like, oh yeah, that's my thing, until I was exposed to these types of art forms, to ambient music, to minimalism, to incidental music, to serial music, to all these things that challenged our very notions of like, what is in this box that we call music or art. And I think what it did for me is it made me feel like that because I'm someone who can appreciate that's my thing. So
It showed you more of who you are.
it showed me more of a side of myself. Yeah. I mean, of course, I don't just dabble in those sorts of styles, but at that time it was so influential and so life-changing that I know that I can step into that sort of gig or playing situation or be commissioned for something like that, and I know that I could really put a lot of myself into it, which I actually did for Laura Carbiani, who is a congregant here that did an art show and asked me to perform some music for this opening of this show. And I very quickly put together some musicians, and we went and did it, and it was awesome. It always feels like I'm doing something very close to me when I get to perform that kind of music.
Will you do some of that for us now?
Sure. What I brought with me today is a kind of an homage that I wrote for Philip Glass, and what I'm extracting from is one chord. It's an F minor chord, just a simple triad, simple 3-note chord, and there are 2 other chords in here, but the majority of the material is just from that. So, but now you can kind of hear what I mean. Thank you.
So it sounds like a lesson that I take from your story is to remain open to the things that can change us, can change our sense of who we are, who we might be, what we can do.
What we think of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. What we believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to share a little bit more about this ball, which I was introduced to breath work when I started practicing Ashtanga yoga, which is a style of yoga, and I teach it now. But there's a formal name, it's called pranayama, is another name for breath work in yoga. And there's all kinds of different breath exercises that people can do. But somebody, through the course of all of this, it really changed the way I think about my breathing. And I say to everybody when I'm teaching yoga, you only need two things for yoga, your breath and your body, and you've already got them both. And so then what happens is changing our relationships with our breaths and our bodies. And so the most basic thing is just your inhale and your exhale. And so that's what this ball is about, is like recognizing that when we breathe in, it's this like expansion. And when we breathe out, it's this contraction. And most of us just think of breath as just that. Expand, contract, expand, contract. But there's also this, I've been taught to think, and I believe now, there's this natural pause between each inhale and each exhale that happens that we don't even think about. We spend so much time, and especially in times of COVID, and as somebody pointed out to me, with the wildfires, with racial injustice, with COVID, there's so much that's taking our breath away, that's keeping us from breathing deeply, that it's that much more important to practice breathing, because we need to be breathing as fully as we can. So what I wanted to invite folks to practice tonight is this 4-part breath practice, which is just beginning by noticing your natural breathing rhythm. And, I'm going to actually invite Danny and Connor to do that while they're recording, invite you to do that. Folks who are watching online, just take a moment to pay attention to your natural breathing, to the pace of your inhale and exhale. And then begin to take a moment to notice if there is a briefest pause between them. And if anything comes up, if there are thoughts or sounds around you, just let that be part of the ambient noise, the music accompanying the soundscape. And what I'm going to invite you to do now in your next set of breaths is to see if you can just expand that space just a little bit. The space at the height of the inhale and the depth of the exhale. Not to strain your breath, not to hold your breath. Just to explore that space. Kind of like what James was talking about with extrapolating in those spaces in the music. But do this with your breath now. Just take a couple more rounds of breath like that. and then return to your natural breathing. So I offer this to you because your breath is something, it's a tool you have with you everywhere. Even if you forget your cell phone, you won't forget your breath. And it's often a barometer that shows us how stressed we are, if we're breathing rapidly or really shallowly. But I offer this to you as a practice to explore the space in your life, to slow down, to notice, to ground, to change the way you think about your breathing, about what can be. And that is about all the time we have tonight. So we're going to sing Turn, Turn, Turn again. Are there any last words you have to share, James, before we do?
I think part of the things that we discover when we challenge ourselves is how our resistance, like what made it a challenge in the first place, sometimes just, seems silly afterwards. You're like, oh, this is actually great. So, a lot of the things I discovered musically came from just challenging myself. If I heard something I didn't like or I didn't understand, I just lean into it a little more instead of being like, nope, not doing that again.
Lean in.
Lean in.
Thank you. Well, we're going to sing this song for you all and together one more time, and I hope that you will consider singing along, breathing along, maybe even dancing and moving. To everything, there is a season. Turn, turn, turn. It was, I think, Pete Seeger originally, and then the Byrds really took it to new heights. So,
Yeah, I'm super glad that you brought this to us.
I'm so glad we could do it.
Now we're bringing it to you.
Yeah.
To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. A time to plant, a time to reap. A time to kill, a time to heal. A time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time of love, a time of hate, a time of war, a time of peace. A time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time to love, a time to hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late.
Friends, may you know the strength and resilience of embracing and leaning into difference and change, of being open to the winds of change, the possibilities of what it might bring out in you, and what it might expose you to. May you and may we go in peace and make peace and love. Blessed be, and amen.